SHK Vayigash, Teves, Pashin, Chet. Rabbi Gaffney.
Come on a little closer. Right, so we're turning this week to SHK Vayigash. Near the end of the parsha, chapter Member. Chapter Memvov, Pasik, Teves, and Lamed, and Lamed Aleph. Well, we see that in the parsha that we have several, we have at least two very significant, what you might call reunions. Or acquaintance of people who were separated for many years. That Yosef meets with his buddy, though he met them. Before he met them 2 or 3 times before. But in the parsha, he reveals himself to his brothers. And there's a reunion, and there's a very miyuchad and special reunion between Yosef and Binyamin, his younger brother, and his brother from his mother, from Rachel Imeinu. We see that they meet in a very special way. And then later on in the parsha, Yosef meets with his father, with Yaakov Avinu. And that meeting has in itself a very remarkable speciality that Yaakov Avinu, at least on a certain level, he was of the opinion that Yosef had passed away from the world, even though, as Rashi indicates on numerous occasions, he had what you might call a fifth sense, a certain realization that things had not been so al derech hayosheb and Teves, in that whole union with Yosef and his brothers. Nonetheless, he actually meets up with Yosef B'Pel Mamish, a new and tremendous reunion of Yosef and his father Yaakov Avinu. So even though we're going to deal with that whole concept in general, but we're going to pay particular attention to the meeting of Yaakov Avinu and Yosef, which is put down in this chapter in Pasik Teves. And it's written, Vayeser Yosef merkavtoi, that Yosef personally himself bound up the horses to his chariot. Vayal likras Yisrael aviv, and he went up to come out and meet, or to go to approach his father Goishno, into the land of Goshen. But that's where the Yidden entered, and they later, under Yosef's instructions, they took up their actual residence in Eretz Mitzrayim. But it was very close. According to certain statements or certain madrashim, it was very, very close to Eretz Yisrael, and it even sort of absorbed itself somewhat into the Gvul, like went into Eretz Yisrael, the Gvul of Eretz Goshen. And so he went up into that land to meet and to go in front of his father, Vayero Elov, and he allowed himself to be seen to his father. He appeared in front of his father, Vayipel al Shavarov, and he fell on Yaakov Avinu's neck. Or somebody fell on somebody's neck. Let's put it that way. Vayipel al Chavarov. Vayef al Chavarov oid. And having fallen on the neck of his father, we'll touch it that way, then he wept on his father's neck with considerable weeping. Rashi says, Vayef al Chavarov oid, that he wept with tremendous length and volume, much more than usual weeping. And the word oid indicates like a continuous increasing or additional type of weeping to what had been up to now. And then Yaakov Avinu says to his newfound son, he says to him, Vayemi Yisrael El Yosef Amusa Hapam. I can even die now if I want. He mentions already Dinyan Amisa. Acharei Riyosi Esponecha. After I've already seen your face, then Kilu, as we might say, it doesn't really matter even if I die now. Everything I could possibly have wanted in my life has now been perfected, or mushlam. Ki oidcha choy, because after all, you are still in the world of the living. So comes along Rashi, and Rashi tells us quite an amazing factor that occurred here in the meeting of Yosef and Yankov. Rashi first of all tells us that Yosef, he was the one who bound up his own chariot. Hu achmei oso es asusim la merkova. He himself was the one who bound up the horses, and we have to bear in mind that Yosef was a king. He was a royal figure. He'd been given the complete running of the whole of Mitzrayim by Pari, except that he wasn't called the Pari Bapil Mamish, but he was at, you might say, the power behind the throne, and for that matter, even in front of the throne. He was, in effect, the power in Mitzrayim, so that he should take the trouble of personally tying up his own horses to the chariot, and that's a remarkable, what you might call, vital of his own personal honor. Says Rashi, Lizdares lichveid ovi, to show just how energetic and devoted he was being to the covet of his father. In other words, out of the way act to indicate the inyan of kibud av. Vayera elov, he appeared to him. So Rashi says, Yosef nira el ovi, that you shouldn't have any mistake and think it's the other way, that Yankov showed himself to Yosef. But what it means is that Yosef appeared to Yankov. In other words, he made himself visible, especially to Yankov. So why does Rashi have to point that out? Because just the way it's written in the Pasuk, it's all written in the third person after Yosef having prepared his chariot, and it could maybe mean the other way around, and we're going to see a classic example of learning things the other way around in a minute. Maybe it meant that Yankov appeared to, or showed himself, or allowed himself to be visible to Yosef. So therefore Rashi is careful to point out that it wasn't that way. It was Yosef made himself visible. He made himself visible to his father. Now that tends to indicate there was some special act on Yosef's part, that maybe he wasn't particularly visible, and he made out of a special act of energetic attention that he should be visible to his father. And then Vayef al Chavarov oid, he fell on Yaakov Avinu's neck, and he wept on Yaakov Avinu's neck oid. So Rashi says Loshen harbeis b'chiyah. That means a tremendous amount of weeping. Vayef means he wept, and oid means a great deal of weeping. And he brings I don't know the word oid, it just means in addition to. or it means, further, or the word oid is a relative word, adding to something that we already have, either in time or in quantity. He brings a dogma from a pasuk in Ioiv, where the word oid means addition of considerable nature on what we would imagine, what we would picture to ourselves. And therefore he brings from Ioiv Kiloi al Ish Yosim Oid, that the Eibush is not going to place on the man more. And so Rashi says, Loshen Ribuihu, Eina Somalov Ilois Noisafes al Chatoav. The Eibush punishes him, as you might say, proportionally to his sin, but he doesn't go looking for all sorts of plots and making all sorts of tricks to get Mensch into trouble and make things even worse, and therefore even of more additional ability to punish him. He only punishes him according to what we would expect, doesn't it? The Afkan Hirbo v'hoishif b'vechi Yosef al Harogio. And here the same idea, that Yosef wept, and he was marbi with weeping more than is accustomed. Yosef al Harogio, an unusual quantitative amount of weeping. So that was Yosef, he's showing his feelings to Yankov Avinu by a ribui, a tremendous amount of weeping. And what's with Yankov Avinu? What did he do? So Rashi says, Avu Yankiv loy nofal al shovarei Yosef. Yankov didn't fall on Yosef's neck, literally. But we don't see that written. It's not written. It's only written that Yosef cast himself literally on his neck. Or it's not written that Yankov cast himself on Yosef's neck. So there he said, no, he didn't. And he didn't, veloy no shoke, and he didn't kiss him either. He didn't embrace him or kiss him, which we would have expected after so many years of separation, and desperate separation into the bargain. Says Rashi, you want to know why? He said, V'omer Rabbi Seinu, our sages taught us, Shahoya Koire Eshma. But Yankov Avinu was busy reading Kriyashma. And remember, we have a halacha when you're in the middle of Kriyashma, that you don't make any signs with your hands, and you don't make any indications with your eyes, and make all sorts of faces and quips and nochazov inyonim to attract attention or show attention to anybody and to anybody else. If you're in the middle of Kriyashma, you have to act very aware of the fact that you're saying, like the Alter Rebbe brings the Potrogramus Shel Melech, you're reading the latest proclamation of the king in the public square. Well, that's Kriyashma. So you have to read it by aim over the year of Chulas in the Torah and in Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, Yankov Avinu was very careful not to do anything or show any signs. Or you might say, well, there is a din that you're allowed to interrupt mipnei ha'yiro. If you have fear of a king or something like that, you can interrupt. You can even ask his, is he okay? Ask his health, or inquire about his shalom, as they call it, give him shalom. Or even mipnei ha'kovid, if it's somebody who's very worthy of kovid, like a great Talmud Chacham or somebody of that nature, then you're allowed even in the middle of a perik of the Kriyashma to show certain inyanim. But here we have to remember that Yosef was Yankov Avinu's son. He was the senior, he was the Aviv, and Yosef was his son. And therefore he didn't feel that he was able to be shoyel mipnei ha'yira or even mipnei ha'kovid, even though Yankov Avinu, Yosef had the din of a melech, he had the din of a king. But we only ask Mipnei hayira, you only interrupt because you're frightened of the king or whoever it may be, a great person that could maybe damage you. If you in effect are concerned that he's going to maybe damage you if you don't show him that derech of asking. But if you're not worried, and on the contrary, even though he might be a royal figure, but he's your son, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to have any union of looking at him like you're pink fakir. Yosef had to look at his father like a king. Because it's brought down here in the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer. When I say here, it's not the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer is not a Pirush on the Chumash. But in the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, it's brought down over there based on certain psukim here in this parasha that you should look at your father with the kovod of a melech, as they state that. And it's brought down that that's in the same parak where it's written in the Lechodoidi Maimah, the Chosn Maimah. The Chassan is Dei Melamelech, so it's brought down also that Ovi Shaladom Dei Melav Kamelech. A man's father is like a king to him. But that's all from Yosef Legabi his father, but not Yankov Legabi Yosef. So therefore, since Yankov was in the middle of Kriya Shema, says Rashi, he was trying to Kriya Shema, and therefore he didn't do anything. In other words, Yankov Avinu was very, how do we call it, emotionally unactive or inactive in this whole unbelievably dramatic meeting between his long lost and even considered dead son, and all of a sudden he's reading the Shema. That's not the question to the intelligent reader. He didn't have any other time to read Shema, except when you meet your son under such unbelievable circumstances. That's when that's when Yaakov chose to read the Shema. And so, if we're going to say that was the Zman Kriyat Shema, and if he didn't read then he wouldn't be able to read. So that's pretty hard to say that Yaakov Avinu was a Zar man. He said he would leave Kriyat Shema right up to the last few minutes. I mean, we might say that some of the members of the Yeshiva Sod Tamimim occasionally leave Kriyat Shema till the last few minutes. But we can't have any tiners, they learn so hard, and they're so busy with Avodas Hashem and with Limud HaTorah. Nobody said sometimes they're pretty close to the borderline of a Yaakov Avinu. It's hard to imagine, and particularly Yaakov Avinu at this stage he was already a Zokein, and Yaakov Avinu would have been, if he read Kriyat Shema, he read it the other way. He would read it right at the beginning when you can already read Kriyat Shema. Well, he wouldn't leave it right till the last second. So much so was he running late with his Kriyat Shema. They had no prayer to say Kriyat Shema only when he meets his son after 22 years of such terrible suffering, and he comes to do it. Very hard to imagine. And therefore, we have to say that Yaakov Avinu was reading at Pik Faket. He was reading at the beginning of the time of Kriyat Shema. That's what we would say the Zrizim, people who are emissaries Zrizim, they're up in the right time, but they read Kriyat Shema at the right time, at the time when it becomes possible to say Kriyat Shema, not before, because then it's got a certain din of the Evad, post facto. Right when you can say Kriyat Shema, there should be L'chatchila, there's much Kriyat Shema, and they say Kriyat Shema. So we have to assume that's the way Yaakov Avinu did it. If that's the case, then why didn't Yosef say Kriyat Shema v'Yisah Harega? It comes to Yosef. It's a one-way reaction that Yosef, he being the king and he being the pompous member of the whole meeting here, he definitely gave away all his moment to weeping and to greeting and to falling on the neck of his father. V'chulei v'hilu Yaakov Avinu, he chose to read Shema at that moment. If that was a time that you had to read Shema, it was a big Indian to read Shema, but Duke on the clock, that's when it came out to read the Shema. Yosef should have been doing the same thing. If I was Yosef, wasn't reading the Shema, and he was free to react in the way that he did. And B'klal, as we said before, it's Amilsa de Tmia, a very strange and wondrous thing, that Yaakov Avinu would be reading Shema B'Diudah. He would have got everything ready and got everything done, as you might say. He probably done with chakras and the whole thing, whatever he had to do, Yaakov, he got it already done, and so they'd be able to meet his son, how to call it, be able to devote his whole soul to this historical meeting. That's what appeared that Yosef did. It would appear at first glance. And that's what Yosef did. And I now pinked at that moment. Yaakov Avinu's Kodesh Shema. He's reading Kodesh Shema. But what becomes even more amazing is that nobody knows quite exactly where Rashi got that from. There's no Gemara Azar. This is for sure. Statement in Gemara Azar. I mean, it's written when I get to next week's Parsha Vayigash, and so on. It's brought down that Yaakov, before he passed away, all his sons gathered round, and they said Shema Yisrael to him, and he said Baruch Shein Kveid Mal. Who's it? The Gemara Masechta Pesachim. When Yaakov heard them say to him Shema, and they were saying that we also hold by Shema just like you do, and in the Gemara Masechta Pesachim. Oh, that's the other way around. They were saying to Yaakov the Shema in order to back him up and to encourage him and to show him that all his efforts in educating them had been much clearer tremendously. They also held by Yichud Hashem and the whole Arichis. So that's another Indian. Over here, Yaakov Avinu B'diuk at this moment. Lo motzim davar, because we don't find it. And I even looked up in Sfarim, but I bring down all sorts of strange medrashim that we don't have nowadays so much. Also medrashim with different names and everything. Everybody says they don't find such a medrash which state that Yaakov Avinu was Kodesh Shema at that particular moment. The only thing they do find is a very unusual thing, that once somebody asked a shaila by one of the Geonim, that was one of the great halakhic figures and teachers, after the closing of the Shas of Yehuda Goen, one of the very early teachers, after the actual closing of the Shas, following the later doors of the Amoraim, they were called the Geonim. There's a letter in the Igris of the Geonim, some with amazing computerized mind or computer or something, found that somebody asked one of the Geonim what was Yaakov Avinu doing if he wasn't reading. It's a very amazing thing. And he writes that Hoya Koira Eshma. In other words, not a medrash, it's written in an Igris for one of the Geonim that he was reading the Shema. So it's rather unlikely, I don't know, maybe that Rashi would have seen such an eagerness, from one of the Geonim that probably found with all the computers and all the other inyanim, that Rashi would have B'diuk seen that, and he would B'diuk use that in his pirush. It's not dache to bring from such unusual places and so on and so forth. Rashi either brings medrashim, gemaras, Maimorei Chazal, this is well known. He's a likud, Rashi, Kemovin with tremendous ruach hakodesh. He's a likud from all the sources of our sages and so on. Also, Rashi brings Yehoya Koira Eshma. Well, for that it would tend to indicate that Rashi had a shoyre. She had a source somewhere in Ruch near Sadova, and he was on the same, what you might call, line. He was on the same line as this Rabban Yehuda Goen, that they had the Kabbalah, and they knew that there was something going on here with Yaakov Avinu, that it was Kodesh Shema. And if you're on that type of wavelength, like Rashi and the Rabban Yehuda Goen, then you would be able to know that the reason Yaakov Avinu was busy because he was Kodesh Shema. So also, the Shiloh, what is that amazing wavelength that Rashi was on, that he knew at this unbelievable moment? And he'd been waiting, and he never dreamt there would be such a moment after all these years and everything, all the years of worry and suffering and everything. And Shechina Porsche Mimeno with the whole Indian that Yaakov Avinu put up, all of a sudden, here he is. And he's Koida Eshma. Now it's also interesting, the expression that Rashi uses. If Rashi meant just purely the very essential few, al pitur, to say Kriyat Shema, which is a mitzvah sesam in our Torah that you have to read in a certain time, then he could have said Shehoya Koira Kriyat Shema. That's the one which is very regular in our sages. Or he could have just said Shehoya Oyma Kriyat Shema, or something of that nature. But he doesn't say it that way. He says Shehoya Koira Es Shema. He was reading something Shema. In other words, he was reading the Shema Yisrael, obviously. That's a Kavanah Bilti Shum Sofik. But it's an unusual Russian, Shehoya Koira Es Shema. So that's also of interest to notice in Rashi. And also, we need to, it's interesting that Rashi begins with this, he begins the whole portion on which he comments about this with the expression Vayef al Chavarov Oi, that he wept on the neck, he wept on Yaakov Avinu's neck. That Kilo, this sort of thing was expected, that makes sense, that having fallen on his neck, that this and this, these and these inyanim occur. So, what's it got to do with that? So we see, if we look back, then we find, we've seen in the Chumash a couple of times already, where people meet up one with the other, after having not seen one another for years, long years, then the Torah says that they fell on their necks. Vayipel al Chavarah. And the classic example of that is when Yaakov met up with Esau. It was just a few parshas back. In Parsha Vayishlach, it's written that Esau jumped off his camel or his horse or whatever he was riding, and he saw Yaakov, and it's written that he ran towards Yaakov, Vayipel al Chavarah, and he fell on his neck. And so that immediately draws Rashi's comment over there. Rashi says, what did he fall on his neck? What was he up to, Esau? He was trying to bite Yaakov Avinu's neck. Rashi said he tried to bite his neck, and it didn't work, and so on and so forth. As is well known, the famous quotation from the Medrash, that he broke his teeth, but Ka'etzip is over the gun to in the Medrash's marriage as to what happened over there. And over there it's written that they both wept. They wept, both of them, but only the falling on the neck was one way. That was Esau fell on Yaakov's neck. So over there, the Targum Yonis and Uziel goes out of his way so far to say that Esau fell on Yaakov Avinu's neck, anxious to bit his neck, and he wept because he didn't succeed, but on the contrary, he got broken teeth. That's why he went, at least they thought it. And in the Targum Yonis and Ben Uziel, we seem to become amazingly popular with these opening and shuttings. What's going on over there?
They usually have a shir in here, so they thought the shir's in here.
Are they have a shir?
No, it's in another room. It's usually in here. So all the bochum will come in here one by one.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they must know that the shir is not here.
Not yet.
Seemingly not yet.
Not yet.
It was decided at the last second, because even Rav Gofen also came here. Rav Gofen also opened the door and went out.
So what are they going to do? Find another room, hopefully. So I'm certainly not going to move this whole group of guys out of the room. I mean,
There's plenty of rooms.
there's plenty of rooms. All right. So back to our theme. So over there we see that the Targum Yonis said the reason they wept was that Yaakov Avinu had a sore neck. The Targum Yonis in Ben Uziel says that even though Esau didn't in effect have any atzlocha in biting Yaakov Avinu's neck, but nonetheless he did to a certain extent cause Yaakov a discomfort. That's why Yaakov wept, and he wept because he ended up losing teeth on the deal. So we see that he tried to achieve something by this Vayipel al al yipel al tzavaro. So, but however, in the pure, simple understanding of the matter, why would he fall on his neck? It would seem that when there's been a long time that people haven't seen one another, haven't met, then in that particular time, or according to the way our Ovis and their mishpacha, or whoever they were at that particular time, it was a dover mekubal to sort of run to one another and sort of fall on the neck. It was like a form of an expression. However, obviously there's other ways that you could show your emotion. You could just embrace the person, like Rashi brings here the word, he could have kissed him. Now that's interesting because nobody seems to mention that whole Indian here, but Rashi says he didn't fall on his neck and he didn't kiss him. Well, that would tend to indicate that that would have been an expected thing, or they could have shook hands, or who knows what they could have done. So where one person rushes up to another person and falls on his neck, I mean, that's not a normal form of embrace. If you fall on somebody's neck, then that means like you're casting himself, in this whole area around the neck. It's a rather awkward sort of thing to do. And l'chleira, it leads, like Rashi learned, like the Targum Yenis and Ben Uziel says over there, that it led to discomfort. It wasn't comfortable for either of them over there by Yaakov and Esau. In other words, that Esau had what you might call, as Rashi brings over there, the truth of the matter is that Esau really changed his mind at the last minute, and he really did want to embrace Yaakov with genuine emotion. And so therefore falling on the neck would tend to indicate like a grieving way of reunion, but it's connected with a form of pathos, or sort of painful remembrance, because there's enough painful remembrance over there, that's for sure, of their past, and yet nonetheless here they're trying to expand it at the midrashic, what you might call dimension of the matter is that Esau, you've got some problem there with you're in the middle of your night exercises or something. That Yaakov had some problem. I'm sorry, Esau. He had some problem. The Yetzer of Esau nonetheless couldn't avoid the situation and couldn't avoid the opportunity of taking some form of revenge on Yaakov. However, the next time around we meet up with it at the beginning of the parsha when Yosef meets up with his brothers. And he, when I say meets up with them, he reveals himself to his brothers. It's written that they all, were tremendously taken aback. And then it's written that later he greeted them personally. And then it's written that he kissed them. It's written that he kissed his brothers. Oh, but with Benjamin, we see it wasn't like that. Benjamin, it's written that he fell, that Yosef fell on his neck, or Benjamin fell on Yosef's neck. But once again, it seems to have been a more sort of one-way thing, more from the fact that Yosef fell on Benjamin, or Benjamin fell on Yosef, rather than the other way around. Over there, Rashi says that what happened was, Rashi says that they wept, both of them, and they were one on one another's necks, and they wept for the Batei Hamikdash. Now Rashi brings that as that's the pshat, and that's the simple meaning that Yosef wept for the Beis Hamikdash. The emes of Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed twice because it came out Bechel Choshel Benyamin. Part of the Beis Hamikdash, at least, was in the Chelik of Benyamin. It's one on the Beis Hamikdash stood on a borderline between Benyamin and Yehuda, and so it was partly in Yehuda and partly in Benyamin. And therefore he wept for the two Beis Hamikdashes, which were going to be Rachmanin Nitlan, are going to be destroyed in the Chelik of Benyamin. And Benyamin wept for the Mishkan Shiloi, which was in Yosef's part of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, the Mishkan that they brought from the desert into Eretz Yisrael. He wept for the destruction of the Mishkan. So once again, why do you have to tell me they were weeping for the Beis Hamikdash? They met up and they were tremendously emotional, and therefore And therefore they wept. Why do you have to go and say they were weeping for the Pesach? They were weeping for the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, it's so important to him that you all have to whisper to one another and pass it round to him. Never, he can't live without a piece of the old gleamy adequate grimy toilet paper. So finish it off now. If he's so desperate, he has to have the toilet. Come Teves, what we can suggest is that once again Rashi is concerned with the apparent unusual out of the wayness of the fact that they fell on one another's necks. That would tend to indicate not just a normal form of meeting, but a meeting which had to do with weeping, and weeping, no matter how you explain it, is a thing which is connected with a certain emotional bitterness. There's always a certain bitter time in weeping. In other words, that even if we'll say that they were weeping because they hadn't seen one another for so long, but that the weeping comes from the fact that they hadn't seen one another, and it comes from all the pain that was involved in not having seen one another. And that's why they weep. The father's like a certain melancholy or very deep, what you might call, what we used before, the word pathos, if it's the right word, in the weeping. And the father says, Rashi, what were they weeping about? Ad kedei kach. I mean, that they fell on one another's necks, that they actually cast themselves on one another's necks, which is an unusual emotional thing to do. And therefore Rashi says that we have to say, being as they were such great people, that they saw into the future that despite their meeting together and despite all the wondrousness, there's going to be a terrible period of a much greater sort, which is going to involve the Klal Yisrael through them in later periods in history. And that's why there was this falling on the neck, a sort of desperately emotional thing connected with bitterness and with weeping. And similarly over here, there kommt zu gehen. Der Diener von Jakob mit Yosef. We have to say that Yosef wept a great deal, because he was aware of all the terrible tzar which had been through, and Yosef, being as he was such an unbelievable great man, he knew that this was only the beginning of another period where eventually they were going to be in Yonim, who knows, and and particularly that he probably knew there was going to be another Golus, the Golus Mitzrayim, with the whole Arichas Ainim, and therefore he wept not in a natural way, not in a normal way, even if we'll say that you get emotional when you meet up with somebody that you haven't seen in a long time. He wept oid, very much so. And therefore stellt sich the gewaltige Scheile, doch in Cain, Yaakov Avinu was a very emotional man. Now where do we know that? We know that from the fact that the way he reacted when he heard Yosef's passing, that he just wouldn't be Mekabel Tanchumin, and even though there's a time which is brought down, and I think that Rashi even mentions it, that Al Chaponim is brought down, that somebody who's not really dead, you can't really, can you? You can't really get him out of your mind if he's not really somebody that's passed away. But nonetheless, he reacted tremendously emotionally, Yaakov Avinu. Therefore, Rashi's amazed that if Yosef saw that this was a moment to go beyond all normal ways of greeting somebody and fall on his neck, ad kedei kach, fall on the neck of his father, who's Dima Lamelech Etzloi, and nonetheless he fell on his neck and he wept tremendously, then Yaakov Avinu should be weeping equally tremendously, if not more. And as far as Rashi, we have to have some time. Why didn't Yaakov show any emotion? Klal. It's not mentioned anything. And therefore Rashi says, look, there's a less madrega of falling on somebody's neck to give him a kiss. He could have kissed him, not having seen him so long. And therefore said Rashi, not that and not that. He didn't fall on his neck, which we would have expected, and Elohim L'Shaka, he didn't kiss him either. It's how beyond expectation altogether. And if I was Rashi, we have to say, we have no brainer but to say that he was involved in something completely different. Yeah, he was kashur and involved in some Indian which was mamish so high and so beyond that it was monea. It prevented him that he should be able to express what he would normally have done. In other words, he was an emotional man, Yankee. And as well known, the greater people are, the more they suffer from delicate emotion. It's well known. When I get to the stories from our Rebbeim and so on, that the delicacy of their emotions and their sense of pain and upset was unbelievable. And so that's what we would have expected from Yankee, being as he is, a Neshama D'Atzilus, and not Stam a Neshama D'Atzilus, he's Teves Sheba Atzilus, the highest Madrega that we can imagine. And after it became, so therefore Rashi says, oh yeah, you know what? I happen to know, and I'm telling you, nobody knows where it was. I happen to know that he was reading Shema, whatever that means. He was reading Shema. And it's how Yaakov was he was in another world of Yichud Hashem. By the way, I'd just like to mention that these people who leave in the middle, I think it would only be fair that somebody inquire what they get up to. Because I found somebody, I don't want to mention any names, that came down from the Zal in the middle of the learning upstairs, and he was sitting playing with a telephone over there in the library. And so when I inquired what he was doing there, he said, it's a bit much for him, and he had to come down and take off a bit of a break, and there he was playing with the telephone. So, to anybody who walks out of my classes, and we'll find that he's not dealing with an essential need of human beings, which is to go to the toilet, or if they're not dealing with that, then the situation is going to be very, very grave. Okay? So somebody who considers himself appropriately responsible should find out what the heck this guy's doing and what he's doing. Okay, not now, but afterwards. Okay, so that's basically the Shaila. You know, what's he doing reading the Shema? So, come along certain people, and they want to say that the reason Yaakov Avinu was reading the Shema was the following. The leader of this approach to the problem, the reader of this approach to the problem is the Maharal Prague. He's one of the first people that says this type of thing, but he's followed with different nuances in the same general cloud. And the Maharal Prague says that Yaakov Avinu, he was a sort of person that everything that occurred in his life, he tried somehow or another, at the moment where he should have expected the greatest of all possible relations, and the greatest of all possible emotional arousals, that he tried very hard to connect it all with Hashem. In other words, what Yaakov Avinu was doing by reading the Shema was he realized just how unbelievable this chesed was, that here he is, after 22 years, not only meeting his son in rags and tatters, who's been, who knows what, for the whole 22 years, even though quite a few of them he was in a prison, that's not very geschmack. But at this particular time, here he is, the leader and the king over the whole of Mitzrayim. Yaakov Avinu realized that was an unbelievable chesed from the Eibishter, and therefore he tried to elevate his mind and his whole connection to the Eibishter at that moment, a much higher and much more profound and tremendous oifen that's ever been before in his life. And therefore he took all those in Yonim and he gave them to Hashem and was miyachet Hashem, because what he saw was the unbelievable chesed and ava which Hashem had showed him. In other words, that was Yaakov Avinu's, that was his way and that was his derech. The following Yonim that happened to him in life, that in any way demanded special attention, he would take that back to how that's Hashgacha Proteus, Miyuchedes, and how that's a sign, like the Alter Rebbe brings in the famous Igeres in Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe wrote that Igeres when he got out, that he said that that's a Kiruv Hashem, and it's a union of tremendous Kiruvus Hashem Yesem Milfanim, much more of what's been up to now, that ever you have to thank the Eivisher, and you have to take all your thoughts, and you have to become twice as bottled to the Eivisher than what you were for. You have to become completely bottled. Kula kamei kalecha chashivei masha yesa kamei alei yesa loi, says the Alter Rebbe. The higher you are in front of the Eivisher, the more bottled you have to be. So, I mean, I'm already teaching that in the words of the Marami Prag. That's not exactly what the Marami Prag says. Oh, but that's Kavanose Haklali is that Yaakov Avinu took every positive and wondrous thing that happened to him, and he was gave him a further reason to be oile and misdabig and makasher his whole matzias and his whole makshava to the Eibishter. And if Isa Harege, he was Kere Es Shema, picked as if the Alter Rebbe demands, then instead of going around poking fun at the Misnagdim, you should spend all your time becoming more bottled to the Eivishter at the unbelievable chesed what he's done for it. And he uses over there the whole beer, Kula Kamei Kalei Chashiva. So that's one shitta, that's a shitta from the Marami Prag. Listen, I don't like giggles across the tables. I don't care if they have the best reason, but I don't like it during my classes. In that line come a lot of other great people, and even some of the great Sifrei Chassidus Poland, by the great Gedolei Chassidus Poland, and they go on that line and they say that whenever a mensch has an emotion in life, he should take it and use it in Vedas Hashem, and he should take everything that happens and try to elevate the emotions of that and through that correct the general emotion in that particular experience with one of the midas in serving Hashem, etc., etc. They base themselves on that klal at the Marami Prag. So we move a little bit further in that general direction, and we go a bit higher. And there was a great sefer which was written called the Tzroyer HaMoyer. It was written by I've forgotten his name at this particular moment, but he was one of the Gerushei Sefarad. One of the people who was driven out of when all the Yidden were driven out of Spain. What do they call it? The Spanish something or other. Not the Inquisition. The Inquisition was prior to that, or after it. They drove out all the Yidden officially from Spain. Yes, he was one of those people. In other words, he was in a period of history when it was very, very terrible time for a huge amount of the whole Klal Yisrael who were living at that time in Sfarad. And they were driven out at that time, and they scattered all throughout the parts of Europe, or Eastern or Western Europe rather, and many of them got to Mitzrayim and other places in the Middle East as well. So he writes over there, and the amazing thing is that he stresses very much in his sefer the Indian of Simcha. And he was a person that had the most terrible suffering. He was not only driven away, he also chased by many of the other goyim, persecuted, and I twice what he didn't go through. But he writes these amazing passages where he says that you have to be dafke b'simcha and a whole arichas ha'inyan. However, he says something what is similar in the line of the Marami Prag, but on a much higher level. And he says that Yaakov Avinu B'Klau, as we pointed out from that Gemara earlier, Yaakov Avinu had a special message to the world, and it was this Indian of Shema Yis, the whole Indian of Yichud Hashem, and Bittul of all the Elamas, Derech Achtas, to the Eibishter. Well, that was Yaakov Avinu's speciality. Ever, the Gemara tells us in Psachim that when he was passing away, he called together all his sons, and he wanted to know where they were holding, and therefore they all said, oh no, just like you were holding only by Shema, we're also holding only by Shema. In other words, there was a very miyuchadik service in Yaakov Avinu's whole Indian teaching and bringing to the world around him, not just like Avraham Avinu began the emunah in the fact that there is the Eibush, that he's the balabas of the world, but the Indian of Bittul Ha'elamus and Yichud Hashem, the Indian of Achtus of the Eibush. This was Yaakov Avinu's whole message. And when Yaakov Avinu sees that his son has become a miller, and he sees this whole Indian of this unbelievable chesed what has occurred, that not only Yosef is alive, but Yosef is his son. And that's Yosef appeared to his father, as we saw earlier. In other words, he made his father take a good look at him before anything occurred, and Yaakov was able to see that he was in effect Yosef. He wasn't Cholila, anybody that had altered, but on the contrary, he'd even gone up higher in the way to Hashem, because he'd achieved this unbelievable status in the physical world, and yet nonetheless it was written all over him that he was this unbelievable Yosef HaTzadik. And it's one honor we only call Yosef, out of all the forefathers, he's the only one that we actually use the word HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik. And therefore, when Yaakov Avinu saw that, as he said that now's the time to announce to the whole world, and who have I got in front of me, anybody better that can be masik this whole Indian, and that's my son Yosef. He is a whole new Indian where we have to shrei Yichud Havayim. And if Yaakov Avinu took one look and Vayera, he saw what Yaakov Avinu what Yosef showed him. And Yosef said, "You see, my father, this is me." Yosef showed himself to his father, says Rashi. The reason that Rashi says that, I think, is that Rashi's saying that this whole thing of appearing and of coming and the whole in of weeping and all thing, that was Mitzat Yosef. In other words, that Yaakov wasn't an active party. Now the reason Rashi's anxious to point that out is that there's another way to learn this thing, and that's the Ramban. And the Ramban, and followed quite a few great Meforshim follow the Ramban, and they say it was the other way around. They say that Yaakov Avinu showed himself to Yosef, and Yaakov Avinu fell on Yosef's neck, and he was the one who wept. And not Yosef fell on Yaakov's neck, they picked the other way round. And the Ramban Taina, the most amazingly simple Taina, he said, if you are a father that's missed your son, you've thought he was dead for 22 years, and all of a sudden you meet up with him, and he's full of all sorts of pomp and splendor, and he's not only complete, but he's young, and the whole thing. He said, who is it that weeps? He said, the father weeps, and the son tries to comfort his father. That's the way it normally works. And he said, Rashi tries to persuade me that Yosef did all the weeping, and Yaakov Avinu was the independent one. He said, no, pick fakir, it was the other way round. He's up to Ramban. And if Rashi says, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't possibly agree with that. No, what happened was Pik Fakir, that Yosef, he showed himself to his father. And therefore the Tzroyer Amoyer, he says that he's amazed at what the Ramban says. How could the Ramban say such a thing? If you understood Yaakov Avinu, and you must realize that he was, his way of reacting to this whole thing was dafki through a inactiveness, which was really a tremendous activity. And that was that he was Koyra Es Shema. Now, in order to answer the kashiyas, why wasn't Yosef reading Shema? If it was the first moment that you can't read Shema, Yosef should have been reading. And it was the last minute, it's a kasha of Yankiva. What was he doing reading at the last minute? And everyone said that's Ramah and others similar to him. They want to say, no, not that the pshat that Yaakov Avinu, or upon him some suggested, that not that Yaakov Avinu was mamish reading Kriyat Shema, else the Kriyuv of Kriyat Shema. And therefore Rashi is careful to say, Haya Koyra Es Shema. He was just reading Shema. He wasn't necessarily being Mekayim the Chiyuv, was saying Kriyat Shema. He was saying Shema. Yaakov Avinu was announcing the Shema to the world. And if Yaakov Avinu went into a tremendous union of Yichud Havayim at that particular moment, Dafki Mitzad, the tremendous Gilui, because he saw here an unbelievable Gilui. Of course, in other words, Yaakov didn't look at situations purely on their human value. he saw there was the Eibishter, like the Alter Rebbe says up there, B'Yesser says, or B'Yesser, is much more than you can imagine. He is the Eibishter. Give a cook an unbelievable Parati is an unbelievable Gile Elikus. Well, now I know that I got to announce to the whole world, we're going to go without any holdbacks, and we're going to teach the Indian for Yichud Hashem, that everything is batil, and really everything is HaShK in the Indian, that everything is Elikus Papel Mami. And the fire, he said Shema, pinked in them Rega. At that particular moment, that's what he chose to say the Indian of the Shema. Comes again, the Tzorah Moyer. And he said this was a whole new determination, a whole new chayas on the part of Yankov Avinu. And he said, how come that he didn't weep? He said, because when you go into a battle of that nature, to Yichud Hashem, you got to be b'simcha. He said, if you cry, even if you feel that you're crying, b'simcha doesn't is good. In other words, crying torn and dying. Because crying actually is a sign of pathos, or some sort of Indian. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the very famous story. It's hard to understand somewhat, but it's a state that's brought down in the Sefer Torah Sholem with the Sichas of the Rebbe Rashab. Was brought there once on Simchas Torah, when it was a tremendously high moment of Simcha. One of the very big mashpiyim that the Rebbe Rashab held from him a lot is that he all of a sudden began to weep in the midst of Simcha that was going on, and the Rebbe Rashab reprimanded him, and the Rebbe Rashab said that in the middle of Simchas Torah there shouldn't be any weeping, because even though there might be a good reason for the weeping, but that's not a tnua amitius of Simcha. It's got in itself a certain pathos. Therefore, it's tormenish, it's forbidden to cry. That's what he said about Simchas Torah. You're not allowed to cry, even if you're crying mitzad Simcha, or you're crying mitzad Tshuva, or was on the time. Simchas Torah ain't managed. Therefore, the Tzorah Moyer says Yankov Avinu couldn't cry at this moment, because he was going into a whole new announcement of his whole shitta. And on the contrary, he'd been encouraged and he'd been strengthened that now he's going to announce the Indian from Shema Yisrael, Oid B'Yesser Eis, B'Yesser Ois, that there's really no other Matthias Chutz from the Rebbe. Ein Oid Mil Vadei. Well, those are the types what the Alter Rebbe brings over there in Shara Yichud. Those are the emes, the types of Shema. And the fire Rashi says, "Oh, Koida Eshma." He was talking, and that's the Indian for Shema. Is brought in considers the der heron, not just to hear, but Shema means you hear in a pnimia. You take it into yourself and you shuckle yourself out. But pnimia is that ein oid milvada, and the fire that can only be b'simcha rabba. These are the Tzorah Moyer. The poor man was stuck from pillar to post in the most terrible way most of his life, and he writes over there that you have to be Yichud Hashem, and it has to be Dafki B'Simcha Gedolah, and therefore Yankov Avinu couldn't possibly have anything to do with crying. And who did all the activity was Yosef. Yosef was one who did the weeping, but not Yankov Avinu. As I said, the Tzorah Moyer. It's an amazing a thing. It's also Miyusha. The Kashi is, why wasn't Yosef reading Kriyat Shema? Because they both, the Chiyuv of Kriyat Shema, for sure, they'd already both said. At whatever point he was supposed to say it. But he was a new Indian of Shema, the whole Indian of Der Herren, B'Pnimius, to listen deep, what does it mean? Yichud Hashem, was it a pshat? Havai Elokeinu Havai? What is the immediate sin from Yichud? Ein oid milvada. On that basis, everything makes sense. That Yankov Avinu was in a whole, what you might call, ecstatic state at that moment, that he was beyond the whole Indian of showing normal emotion. And it was only later when he came down out of that maybe there was doubtless a joyous exchange between him and Yosef. There was plenty of time for that. That wasn't the moment for it. Lefi Shittas Yankov. A giant good Lefi that maybe we could say even slightly higher, and even moving more into the what you might call the realm of Hey Teves. and in the whole, moving more into the whole realm of we want Mashiach now, with the whole Arichas Ha'inyan, that we find that when they met up, that Rashi is careful to say that Yosef showed Yaakov Avinu a sign. He showed him a sign that Yaakov Avinu would, before they met up, that Yaakov Avinu saw this particular sign, and now he knows that Yosef is really, everything is fine. That Joseph's, it would appear holding by everything that he had still hoped and longed that maybe that hadn't been changed. And that's a very amazing thing that Yosef or Pari, we don't know exactly who, sent these, how do you call it, agalot. He sent these, wagons to bring down all the, not even to carry Yaakov Avinu and his whole entourage and his whole luggage and the whole arichas or inyan. So it's written that when they first came to Yaakov Avinu, the sons, and they told him that Yosef was still alive, he didn't believe him, couldn't imagine that would be the case. Even though, according to Rashi, he did maybe believe that somewhere, but it was hard to be grasping that at one moment. And therefore it's written that he took a look at all the things and they showed him what Yosef had sent down, and it's written that he saw the agalot, he saw literally the carts that had been sent, that Yosef sent. Now if you look carefully, Yosef, I don't know if Yosef actually sent those carts, because it's written earlier that Yosef sent carts al pi paroi, the 10 carts that he sent, the carts, were sent al pi paroi. In other words, Pari told him to send. Or there was some indication from Pari that he wanted the carts to be sent. Nonetheless, it's written that Yaakov Avinu saw the carts which Yosef had sent. And then later, a few psukim after this one, it's written that they all got up onto the carts and went further that Pari had sent for Yaakov. So make up your mind, either Yosef sent them or Pari sent them. And Rashi brings down an amazing thing. I don't know if you learned it, yeah, you could have already, it's in today's Kitta. A state taught that Yaakov saw the carts, or maybe even yesterday. He saw the carts, and he saw that Yosef had sent them, and he said, oh yeah. And then Yaakov Avinu all of a sudden became Levitic, and he was convinced that the miracle was in effect true. So Rashi says, was it he saw the cart? So Rashi says that the word for a cart is agalah, with iron, agalah. And that's the same basic word for a young calf is an egel, or an eglah. Yeah, a female calf called an eglah. So that's the same root word as the word cart. So therefore Rashi says that it's a Gemara Masechta Seita. The Gemara brings in Masechta Seita that he showed him a sign before they parted. Yaakov Avinu, originally way back 22 years ago when they parted, that they were learning the halachas of Egla Harufa, which is the famous halacha of if you find a dead person in the country, nobody knows who killed him, then you have to go to the nearest city and they have to bring out a calf and they have to slaughter the calf. Whole ganze arichas, there's a halacha called Egla Arufa. So Yaakov Avinu sent Yosef a sign, and everyone said, wait a minute, the word agalah is a cart and an egla is another word altogether. No, that he saw, Yaakov Avinu saw the carts and he realized that egla and agalah was all one word. Oh yeah, got that. Oh yeah, stood that Yosef was sending him a sign that they'd been learning egla Arufa halachas before they parted. Oh, now Yaakov Avinu's Peseda. So, I mean, that's one of the really puzzling Rashis that all the great Mephoshim go to town to try and work out why Rashi said that's just so simple as Pshut Shalmikra. But anyway, whatever, that's what Rashi says. And so some people say, and maybe it's a good point, that that's why the Pasuk says that these were the carts that Yosef sent. In other words, that if Pari would have sent the carts purely, it would have been purely only Pari, that sent the carts. Al-Khayra, it would have been noticeable that these were, how do you call it, royal Egyptian, what do you call it, armored corps or something, would have the insignias and all the masters, the party that he had on his carts. I mean, if you go to England, he traces it around over there. Anything that's got to do with, it's all got the Queen and this and that. It's all, the royal this and the royal something else. Even the mail's called the Royal Mail, and they're nothing to do with. Therefore, on the Agalot, if they'd been sent by Pari Bilvad, it would have been apparent that these were Egyptian, carts. Therefore, there was something about those carts that attracted young Avinu's attention, and he saw that these were carts Asher Sholach Yosef. Yosef sent these carts. And in other words, they weren't normal Egyptian royal army corps, or whatever you like to call them. They weren't Pari's cart. It's only that Pari agreed to them being sent. Well, that itself is a shaila. Why did Yosef was a rule in the whole Mitzrayim? You had to have a reshus from Pari to send 10 carts. Whatever. I mean, that's another side cast here. Of course. These were Yosef's carts. It was clear that Yosef had made a special effort that these carts would be individual carts, that they came from him, not through the whole Egyptian regime. And if Yosef, Yaakov took a look, and he didn't see Egyptian carts, but he saw Yosef's carts. And then we picked up why would Yosef do that? Carts, Egelo and Agolo are the same word, and he hopped that this was like a very careful, hidden, well-disguised way of Yaakov showing him that there's something going on here. And you remember the whole Indian of Egla Arufa. And so the great Meforshim go into a whole big Pirush Pinimi, what's the connection of Egla Arufa with Yaakov and with Yosef, and that they met up, and that there'd been the whole separation when they got to Arichas Ha'inyan. Oh, that's not the place in the Shir here to get involved in that. That we see that Yosef, he sent a siman, and he showed Yaakov Avinu this was Yosef through the Indian from Limud HaTorah, and not just stam Limud HaTorah. They weren't just stam pilpling around. They were learning the halachas of Egla Arufa. They were learning what is Egla Arufa, because it's not mamish become a mitzvah, but it's going to be one of the mitzvahs of the Torah. And therefore they were learning Torah, mamish, what you might say, in a practical way, a libud, the Maisa, and they were out to change the world. And that was Yaakov Avinu. That was, like we said, that was his whole Indian. That was Indian. And afar, Yaakov Avinu chapped the remez, and he saw Egla Arufa, and that's the halachas that we were learning. And that's the Indian from Torah. And Torah is a birur in the world, which is a very high birur. Torah is mulmaila lamata, and that's what Yaakov Avinu wanted. We'll soon see in a second. He wanted to say, we want Mashiach now, way back over there. And he wanted to bring the whole Indian of these scholars, which we're going to see only now, with Melech HaMashiach. He wanted to bring it there. And that's what it's brought down. That when he sent to Esav, it's brought down that he said to him, Vayili Sher V'chamer V'tzein V'evet V'shifcha. And so I looked it up in the Medrash Rabbah, state Claude. It's brought in, it's written clearly that he said to him, Vayili Sher Zeh Moshiach ben Yosef V'chamer Zeh Melech HaMashiach. He stated that he said to Yaakov, I've got Melech HaMashiach in my pocket. Yaakov said to Esau, he said, we're ready for the whole Indian, because his Aveda in Lavan was the Makif the Clippers. Lavan was the taker for all the Clippers. And Yaakov beat him his own game, and he was Mavaran, even that Clipper Nerof. And Lavan, the fire, he was ready for the Indian from his scholars of Melech HaMashiach, wasn't he? Huh? Oh. And remember, he was ready for these scholars of Melech HaMashiach. It's all bottled to my Aveda, and I am the one that the Teves has chosen to be Megaladis in the world. We see that Yaakov was an unbelievable, optimist. He believed that people only would chap what's going on in the world, and they would only chap that really the world is not a world, it's really only bottled to the Avish of Batanas Abitl, isn't it? Then they would realize that all they got to do is just completely give everything away and just do everything to make the world Havaya Lekeina Havaya Cha. Now, So he thought that Zicha, 22 years, Esau was a guy would stay going. Zicha Esau was also busy, that he thought what was happening, and exactly the same thing Yitzchak thought. Yitzchak thought that if he gave Esau the right type of oiros, milmaila, then Zicha Esau would also thought what's going on. He would become the real shorish of Esau with the oiros, the toiv. And Afal became, for some very painful reason, Esau didn't chap himself. But the Rebbe said that now he has chapped himself. Already long ago. And the ganze Tzor is that the Yidden are telling him the wrong thing. Yaakov Avinu hat ihm gesagt, the Emer. They were holding by Moshiach. We're running the world and not you. And Moshiach, Melech HaMoshiach, he stayed in the middle. Not just Moshiach ben David, Melech HaMoshiach. In a fact, if he's there, it all depends. Anyway, let's not get involved in all that for a moment. Upon him, Yitzchak also wanted the same thing. In other words, that our fathers, they were Mishkistim. Our forefathers said that there has to be a world that's got to be botel, and why should we worry about the cancer of Golas and Mises and others? Let's get moving, let's make the world perfect now. I might say, what do they want? The Alter Rebbe says that's why the world was created. The 36th chapter, Parmaim Chai, chapter 36 begins with the words that the whole tachlis of the whole bria was Yemoisa Mashiach and Tchiyotah. I mean, that's what the whole world was created for. Shvilom Nivro. What are we waiting around for? And Yaakov Avinu couldn't figure what the other we were waiting for. The world's only been going for who knows how many hundreds, over 1,000 years, and guns and miles. What was it up to his point? So Yaakov Avinu said, let's bring the world to its tachlis. And the father Yosef sent him a sign. Don't worry, Tata, I'm also holding by the same thing. I'm still, even though I'm a Melech Mitzrayim, and I hope the ganze Mitzrayim off in Kop, as they say, I've got the whole running of the ganze country, Metal and them stink. Oh, but nonetheless, you should realize that I'm the same Yosef. Yeah, I'm still holding by learning the halachas of the Torah. Because the halachas of the Torah, the Eibishter's will. Yeah, I feel as an unusual halacha, like Egla Rufa. Don't worry, if you'll sit down with me, I'll cause it over to you, pick the Zeviyama. That we were walking together and we chazed some of the halachas of Egla Rufa, is I'm ready to do it all again. If Yaakov Avinu saw that, he saw there was some sort of strange thing about these agolas. And was agolas, was it? And therefore he realized that was a remez that Yosef was holding. And when that was before they actually met, and Yosef knew, Yaakov Avinu knew that when he meets Yosef, he'll make his sign also. He'll tell Yosef that I'm the Zel Batat, he departed from you. And it stated in a mime in Ayin Aleph, and the Rebbe Rashab, there's a mime in the SHK Ayin Aleph, where the Rebbe Rashab says clearly the reason why Yaakov Avinu sent Yosef. I mean, what's he doing? He knew that there was a very severe rift between the brothers. I mean, why was he sending Yosef into obvious danger? I mean, what was he up to? And he asked Yosef, he said to Yosef, I'm going to send you. And Yosef said, Hineini, here I am, Shikmir, send me. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Just to find out if the sheep are all right or something. What does it do? Elamai, that Yaakov Avinu, he wanted to bring the Gilead, another trial around. With Esau, he wasn't much later. But he thought, my sons, these are Neshamas Klolias, they're all big tzaddikim, and Yosef is Gora, a gewaltige tzaddik. He's the Neshamas Dama, a whole big beer and citizens. What we'll do is we'll send a tremendous Gilead over, and they'll get together, they'll unite together. We'll be able to bring the whole Gilead Milmaila Mata, and we'll have Moshiach. Malotov. So he said to Yosef, are you prepared? Yosef said, even though Yosef knew that it wasn't such a portion demand, but he knew that that's what the tachlis of the whole bria was, and his father was in favor of that. So he said, here I am, I'm prepared to go up and sit with them. And what happened was that the fact that the Shvatim didn't take that, the Pnim Yisraelim, why they didn't realize that, why the whole thing happened, that with that it was shown Milmaila that it's not going to work so quick. Never. I mean, I say never, because the ultimate Kavanah was that way. I don't mean never against the ultimate Kavanah. I mean for the because the Yidden have had to go through a tremendous amount of golas. And what they revealed to Yosef, what turned out later, was that there's got to be, first of all, a golas Mitzrayim, and then after that there's got to be other Goli years, and the purpose of that is that if Yaakov would get his way, it would all be Maila Lamata and the whole tremendous order to sweep everything by, and there'll be the Gila Mashiach. But the Eibishter wanted, for some reason we don't know, the Eibishter wanted that we should become Kalim, and we should work through all this tremendous what you might call balagan, to use the terrible expression of Olam Hazeh. We should have to struggle with all the terrible Elam Ba'ester and the guns, so that every prat in the physical world becomes a kli to the Gili of Moshe. And there'll be a Gili Dafke B'Pnimiyas, even though the Avish can also make a Gili B'Pnimiyas. The Avish can shikker up a Gili Dafke B'Maila Lamata, and he can make it B'Pnimiyas. But then it's not your Pnimiyas, that's what the Avish does. We had to go through the whole Indian, and that's what Yaakov realized, that it's not going to be so poshut now, and therefore he was in of a nonetheless. He couldn't let go, Yaakov. He said no. When he heard that Yosef was still around, and Yosef sent him this unbelievable simon, so he sent back his simon. It's like, the two adequate, signs on the what do you call the motor call? What do they call rotor call? They were sending messages one to the other, and Yaakov had gesagt, "Haye koire eshma." Koire eshma means you mamshik the whole union of Yichud Avayeh. That's the killer for Mashiach. That's going to be B'Kolei when Mashiach comes. Yaakov said, "Okay, let's try again." And the far, Yaakov didn't give up. He believed that maybe now that Yosef is still alive and he's B'Shleimus, maybe we can still carry it out. And the far, next week's parsha, the amazing thing, the Rebbe's got a whole sikh about it. Maybe we'll talk about it next week, Be'ez Hashem. At the next week's parsha, it's written that Yaakov called all his sons together before he passed away. And Rashi brings over there, Bikish legalish lehem es kate. He wanted to reveal to them, when is the last day? And the Rebbe says, what sort of last day was he? And so therefore the Rebbe said, maybe he meant, is it going out of Mitzrayim? But Yaakov was holding that any time there still can be and will be the case. He never gave up, didn't give up. He said, even though he'd already been shown that the Kavanah Aliyah was something else, but he said, if we really are Misaki, if we really try with the Abish and say, we want Moshiach now, and the Abish would tell, and we really want it, can we knock else? Who knows? We can knock else Sufton. Not only who knows. And therefore, Bikish Legalis Lehem was a case. Rashi said, it didn't work. When the Stalker man Shechina, the Abish for some reason didn't want it. Well, it's impossible to describe. It's impossible for us to know the ultimate greatness of Hashem and these inyonim. Although for some reason, even at that moment, Stalker man Shechina. Mom is just a minute before he passes away from the world, And the Yaakov got a whole new awakening of his shitta, bittul kol ha'olam is begolui right now. That's it. Shleimus kol ha'briya, what we call, we want Moshiach. And that was an akudah that he tried to reveal, and therefore he wasn't able to react, because he was busy, and Yosef wasn't all taken aback by that. Yosef was brought down in the Zohar, that picked the Sefer when Binyamin and Yosef, they wept on one another's shoulders, and that was because of the Bati Mikdash. And Yosef, once again, he wept when he saw his father, and he knew what his father represented. He saw that he was reading the Shema, and he wanted to bring Mashiach now. Yosef had an even deeper insight. He knew that there was going to be never al-Khurban. It wasn't going to be so simple and easy as what his father felt. And therefore, he wept. He wept very much, because he knew there was going to be a very, very difficult birah. And therefore he wept very much. But Yaakov, oh no, Yaakov was a gewaldige action. He said, no, we want Moshiach now. And we got to be poor, and we got to keep going. And Yosef HaTzadik, he had a certain insight, and therefore he wept over it, not Yaakov. So therefore it was like this amazing sign language from 1 to D. to the idea, and that was the whole union of Yosef showing himself to his father. He wanted his father should see that he's Taka Yosef. He's the same Yosef. And the father Yaakov said, oh, das ist Taka mein Yosef, mein Neshama de Ma, mein Neshama von Primis, Ach and Primis, ich weiß das, Primis ain't safe, and therefore we can still get away, we can still do it. So that's exactly the message of Hey Teves. The message of Hey Teves is that even the Mitzrayim, even the people that they sat on the board of judges, and in the Supreme Court it was a Schwarz, one of them was a Schwarzer. And they sat on the thing, and they paskin pink the same with the Rebbe gesagt. That they said that there's such an Indian, a Primus HaTorah, and that is the property of the whole Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe is the only of that, only in the sense that he allows all the Klal Yisrael to use that. He's like what you might call the manager in charge, or they call it the manager of operations, but he's not the manager in the sense that he puts it in his pocket. And he says, oh, these are my Sforim. The Rebbe just is the one that gains the guardianship of the Sforim, but they're open to everybody, and they're the property of the ganze Chassidim and the ganze Klal Yisrael. What are the Sforim? What does Primus HaTorah say? Pick to say what Yaakov says. Ein oid muvad. That's one of the Alter Rebbe saw the Shara Yichud V'Emunah to be one of the Ike Inyanim of the whole Tanya. You know, the Rebbe's got letters about. Shara Yichud V'Emunah says, Koira Eshma, you got to read Shema, it's to say Ein oid mil, Ein oid muvad. That was the whole Inyan of the Tanya. All the other Sifrei Chassidus are the same thing. All the other Sifrei just beauty Malzeh. The Tanya's Torah should be Ksav, and all the other Maimorim and Torah should be out. Torah should be out Peh. Edafar, Kum Tois Lefizeh. And the whole thing is man need to be one Hemshech from Yaakov Avinu. But this time, it's gone through the whole Golas. And we've been Mavara, all the Inonim, and therefore the Rebbe said the Birurim have been completed. They have to be Birurim, but they've already been completed. Now it's a new meeting of Yaakov with Yosef. It's a new inyan. Now it's all ready. And Yaakov happens to be right this time. Right now he's right on the ball. And we're going to get the Gula Shlema moving, and we're going to bring it before Mamish. And it's going to be Lamata Mata, Miyasora Tefachim. And the whole Goddess, Yosef's been holding the flag. The whole Jewish people are called the flock of Yosef. And that's the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe is Dina von Yosef, and Harikot, the Rebbe is Vayili Sher, Hamer Melech HaMoshiach. The Rebbe is the completion and the realization of the whole Inyan B'Poel, and take it Miyad Mamish. We'll all be together with the Rebbe, and that's the message of Hey Teves. And if anybody tries to explain to you otherwise, then you can politely disagree, and you can say that whatever you say is for sure right, but the ultimate point of Hey Teves is the Iskalas of Melech HaMashiach B'Poel Mamish Ali Day, the Iskalas of Ha'ikoira Es Shema. So have a good Hey Teves and a Mil Hashem. We'll have Mahav, and then people make a quick preparation and everything, and then the Mil Hashem will be a hemshech of the performance of Hey.